The airport was buzzing, a relentless tide of rolling suitcases and hurried announcements. I tugged at the sleeve of my silk blouse, feeling the tension in my shoulders tighten. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it, focusing on the counter ahead. I could see her already, my mother, standing casually beside the agent, arms crossed as if she'd rehearsed this moment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no ticket under your name," the agent said, glancing at me with polite finality. I froze, a sharp stab of disbelief cutting through the calm exterior I'd worked so hard to maintain. My mother, however, simply shrugged. No words, no explanation. Just that infuriating, effortless confidence that had always been part of her, and part of the reason I'd spent years trying to prove myself. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but instead I felt that familiar simmering inside me. Hurt, yes, but tempered with pride. There was irony here, sharp and cruel, that she could stand there as if this were some minor inconvenience, while I felt my carefully curated world teetering on the edge. The polished floor reflected my tense posture, and I noticed the faint chip in my nail polish, the subtle tremor in my hand. I'd come so far to be professional, composed, untouchable, but right now, none of that seemed to matter. I glanced at my suitcase. Ready for the flight, I couldn't seem to board, and I realized this was more than a ticket. It was the first challenge of a reckoning that had been years in the making. I remember the first time I truly felt invisible in my own home. I was 16, pacing the narrow hallway of our small suburban house, my backpack heavy with textbooks and my heart heavier with frustration. "Olivia, don't be ridiculous," my mother had said, tossing her perfectly manicured hands in the air. "You'll never make it on your own. College is fine, but don't think you're going to, what is it? Run the world." Her words cut deep, sharper than any argument I'd had with my teachers or classmates. I felt the lump rising in my throat, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped the letter from the art school I'd dreamed about for years. Acceptance. A chance to be myself. And she couldn't even look me in the eye. My father, slouched on the sofa, didn't speak, just flicked through the newspaper like he always did, avoiding the storm entirely. I wanted to scream at both of them, to tell them that I was not a child, that I had ambition and vision that stretched beyond their neat little world. But I swallowed the words, clenched my fists, and turned to the only person who ever seemed to believe in me, Grandma Evelyn. "Never let them tell you who you are, Olivia," she whispered, pressing a small, worn compass into my palm. "It's your world to explore. Even if they don't understand, you have to follow your own direction." I studied the compass obsessively that night, tracing the engraved letters, feeling the cold metal pulse in my hand like a secret heartbeat. I realized then that the world wasn't going to hand me validation. I had to take it. By morning, I had packed my bag quietly, leaving a note for my mother that I would be staying with Grandma for a few weeks to focus on my portfolio. That note was my first act of independence, my first silent rebellion. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was mine. And in that moment, as the bus pulled away from the driveway, I felt the first spark of the woman I was destined to become, resilient, defiant, unwilling to be defined by someone else's limitations. That compass remained my guide through every setback, every doubt, every tiny victory. And as I stood now at the airport, I realized its lesson had never left me. The direction I chose, the life I built, was mine, no matter who shrugged, who doubted, or who tried to deny me. Leaving home with nothing but my portfolio, a small duffel bag, and Grandma Evelyn's compass, I felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. I moved to a bustling city where nobody knew my name or my past. I rented a tiny studio apartment, the kind with creaking floors and thin walls, and began the grueling work of carving out a life that was entirely my own. At first, the nights were the hardest. I'd sit under the dim glow of my desk lamp, eyes bleary from sketching, designing, writing, learning. There were moments when doubt crept in like a cold draft. What if I fail? What if I'm just not enough? But each morning, I gripped the compass Grandma had given me, tracing its worn edges, reminding myself I had my own direction. That's when I met Simone Carter, a seasoned interior designer with a reputation for taking on bold young talent. She was intimidating at first, sharp eyes, sharp tongue, but she saw something in me I hadn't even admitted to myself. "You have an eye," she said bluntly, "but talent means nothing without persistence. Prove me right."
I did.
I worked long hours, juggling freelance gigs, late-night classes, and unpaid internships. There were moments when my body ached, when clients rejected my proposals, when a project fell apart despite my best efforts. But each small victory mattered. My first freelance client who paid promptly, the small boutique cafe that let me redesign their space, the first time I saw my name credited for a successful project. I kept my family at arm's length, sharing only vague updates. They didn't need to know that I'd rented a studio apartment and decorated it entirely with my own money, that I had landed my first major contract with a local gallery, that I was finally, painfully, building a life that didn't depend on anyone's approval. By my mid-20s, I had created a boutique design firm, modest but steadily growing. I had employees I mentored, clients I respected, and a network that valued my vision. Yet, for every win, I carried the memory of my mother's shrug, the airport agent's disbelief, the countless moments I had to convince myself that I belonged here. Through it all, that tiny compass sat on my desk. It wasn't just a trinket. It was a reminder that no one could determine my path, that resilience and tenacity could carve opportunities out of seeming impossibility. Every project completed, every contract signed, was proof that I had followed my own direction. I had built something real, something mine, without anyone's validation, without anyone realizing the scale of what I had achieved. And yet, I knew the reckoning was coming. The airport incident wasn't just about a missing ticket. It was about years of underestimation, of disbelief, and it was about finally showing them, without words, who I had become. The moment they stepped into my office, I could feel the energy shift. My mother, my father, and my younger brother had arrived, expecting a modest, struggling version of me, maybe a polite nod, a few obligatory words, nothing that would challenge their comfortable assumptions. Instead, they were met with a space that reflected every late night, every sacrifice, every ounce of determination I had poured into building a life entirely my own. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a cityscape glittering with promise, while walls were adorned with curated art pieces I had discovered, negotiated for, and proudly displayed. My desk was immaculate, the polished oak gleaming, with the compass from Grandma Evelyn sitting prominently in a brass holder. Books on design, leadership, and entrepreneurship lined the shelves, alongside awards I had quietly accumulated over the years. I watched them take it all in, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to shock, disbelief, and finally, a grudging awe. My mother's fingers twitched, as if she wanted to say something, anything, but couldn't find the words. My father's jaw tightened, and my brother's eyes widened, taking in the sleek office, the certificates, the photographs of completed projects with high-profile clients. I let the silence linger, savoring it for a moment. The power was mine. For so long, I had been underestimated, dismissed, ignored, and now, they were forced to see the truth. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but resolute. This is my company, my team, my vision. I've signed contracts with major clients, designed spaces in 3 states, and built something that's entirely mine. No one gave me this life. I created it. My mother's eyes narrowed, searching for a crack, a hint that this was a fluke. "Olivia, we just didn't realize," she began. I held up a hand. "No, you realized perfectly well, but it didn't matter to you. I'm not here to justify myself. I'm here to show you the result of what happens when someone decides to stop asking for permission and starts taking control of their own life." They were silent again, this time because the weight of my words sank in. I could see the flicker of guilt cross my mother's face, the shame in my father's posture, the awe in my brother's gaze. Every dismissive remark, every shrug, every belittling comment they had made over the years echoed back to them in the clarity of my success. I walked them around the office, showing completed projects, photographs, and even the financials, carefully curated but undeniable proof of my accomplishments. Each display was a silent testament to years of work, late nights, self-doubt overcome, and a relentless drive to succeed. By the time we returned to the center of the office, their expressions had softened, not completely, but enough that they could no longer deny it. The airport incident, the missing ticket, the casual shrug, it wasn't a mistake. It had been a subtle reminder that they had underestimated me for years, and now, finally, they were seeing the woman I had become. Competent, powerful, unshakable. I let the silence stretch a moment longer, feeling the subtle shift in the room. The balance of power had changed, and I could sense it. They were no longer in control, and I finally held the authority I had earned, quietly but deliberately, over years of struggle and growth. "I'm willing to help," I began, my voice steady, "but on my terms. This isn't about old roles, old habits, or unspoken expectations. If we're going to move forward, it has to be different. You have to meet me halfway." My mother's brow furrowed, a faint flash of defensiveness crossing her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean you stop diminishing me," I said softly but firmly. "No more casual dismissals, no more shrugging off my decisions. If you want to be part of my life, you need to respect that I've earned my independence." She nodded slowly, the guilt in her eyes undeniable. I could see her reflecting on years of criticism that had weighed heavily on me, shaping the cautious, determined woman I had become. I understand," she murmured. Turning to my father, I outlined his role. "You've been absent more than present, more comfortable ignoring my achievements than acknowledging them. If you want to have a meaningful relationship with me, I need honesty, engagement, and support. Not empty words or passive judgment." My brother, still wide-eyed, looked unsure. "What about me?" he asked. "You," I said, "need to learn that success isn't inherited, it's earned. Start taking responsibility, exploring your own direction, and stop assuming someone else will clear the path for you. I'll support you, but only if you put in the work." I paused, letting each statement resonate. Conditions were not punishments. They were invitations to grow, to mend, to finally become the people they could be without holding me back. Compassion mingled with firmness in my tone. I cared deeply about their transformation, but I would no longer tolerate the patterns that had stifled me for years. Then, I held up the small brass compass from Grandma Evelyn. This guided me when no one else did. Consider it a reminder for all of us. Direction is chosen, not given. Follow your own, but respect mine. I watched them process it, the weight of years settling into understanding. My mother's fingers brushed the edge of the desk nervously. My father's shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. My brother's eyes, once uncertain, now held determination. For the first time, the room felt balanced. The past no longer controlled me. I wasn't asking for their approval or pity. I was offering a chance to rise with me, to grow together, but under terms that preserved my autonomy and reinforced my hard-won self-respect. And in that power shift, in the calm authority I now radiated, I finally realized how far I had come, from a teenager ignored and underestimated to a woman who had taken control of her own life and refused to let anyone's doubt dictate her future. Weeks passed, and slowly, subtly, the changes I had set in motion began to show. My mother was no longer quick to dismiss my decisions. She asked questions, sought advice, and even offered to help on small projects, not to control, but to contribute. Her smile, once tinged with condescension, had softened into something genuine. My father started attending events, showing up for presentations, asking about clients and contracts. For the first time, I noticed his pride, quiet and steady, finally untangled from years of judgment. My brother began sketching again, inspired to pursue his own creative direction, asking for feedback, making plans. The stubborn resistance that had marked our family was melting, replaced by cautious but sincere effort. One evening, I sat in my office, the city lights casting a gentle glow across the polished floors. The compass sat on my desk, gleaming under the soft lamplight. I traced its edges with my fingers, remembering Grandma Evelyn's words, It's your world to explore. Even if they don't understand, you have to follow your own direction. I realized that direction had brought me here, not just to success, but to a deeper understanding of who I was and what I valued. The struggles, the setbacks, the lonely nights, they had shaped me into someone resilient, uncompromising, and compassionate. Someone who could offer love and guidance without sacrificing self-respect. And in that quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of closure. I wasn't just Olivia Bennett, the woman who had defied expectations. I was the author of my own story, the navigator of my own destiny. The airport incident, the shrug, the disbelief, they were no longer wounds but milestones, markers of the journey that had brought me here. I glanced around my office one last time, feeling the weight of everything I had built and earned. My family was learning to meet me as I truly was, and I was learning to meet them halfway, without compromise to my autonomy. The compass remained a reminder, not just of guidance, but of the power of persistence and self-belief. And as I stood by the window, looking at the city sprawling below, I whispered to myself, a smile tugging at my lips. I take my own flight now, and no one can deny my direction.